So thank you all, and we have got a great panel, and I am glad that everybody got all energized because you are not going to remember that the happy hour is right after we're done, because we're going to have a great conversation. I am really looking forward to this. And what I'm going to ask is that we take a few minutes for each of our panelists to give you a little bit about them, one or two lines about who they are. You can read everybody's LinkedIn is linked from the bios on the website if you want to go into more depth. But we have a whole variety of perspectives here, which is going to make for a really great conversation. You want to start with Minami?
Great. So my name is Minami Ogawa. I am co-founder and director of Cultivated Foods at Optimized Foods. And what we do is we are a edible scaffold platform company, and using mycelium as a base to attach things like animal cells and help them grow. I'm also part of UC Davis CMC, which is the Cultured Meat Consortium. We're a group of 80-plus researchers, professors, staff, students that are working towards some of the biggest challenges in cultivated meat.
Hey guys, my name is Pavle Stojkovic, Chief Strategy Officer at Omeat. We're the ones that are using cow plasma to grow cells. I oversee our product teams. That includes both our ground beef product as well as Plenty, which is our FBS alternative, our bovine platelet lysate. My title is Chief Strategy Officer, but my team knows me as the Chief Hype Man. My job is to eat burgers and get really excited about it. So I'm definitely part of that 20-plus club in terms of tastings. 99% of that being the Omeat burger.
That's a good job description. I like that. My name is Doug Grant. I'm co-founder and CEO of Atlantic Fish Co. We're developing the world's most sustainable seafood, and we're focused on overfished, carbon-intensive, wild-caught species.
Hi, I'm Clair Purcell, the COO of Alcheme Bio. We are what we believe the world's first flavoring company focused specifically on cultivated foods. We're all about replacing the additive flavoring at the end of the process with what we call cellular flavoring at the beginning of the process, so optimizing media and feedstock to have the cells express their own flavors.
That's great. We've got a real variety of perspectives. And I think that is really fitting for the title of the discussion that we're going to have, which is Cultured Meat Unwrapped, Nutrition, Innovation, and the New Culinary Frontier, which is very aspirational, I think, as a discussion. But it certainly does encapsulate how this industry is moving from a real science and technology base into a future as a food industry, with all of that entails. The first thing we want to talk about is the nutrition aspect of this, and I'm interested in hearing how that nutrition part of it maybe moves around or can be interpreted in different ways. I'm thinking if you're growing the mammalian cells just without the animals, wouldn't the nutrition be identical? But maybe it is and maybe it isn't. Maybe Doug, we can start with you on your thoughts on that.
Yeah, I mean, I think the nutrition depends on like what's the job to be done for the consumer coming into it, right? We obviously have some advantages if you're starting with real animal meat. Look, the bioavailability of the protein, higher in animal proteins versus plant-based proteins. For us with seafood, the job to be done, people think about it as something that is healthier, right? There's like the omega-3s, it's leaner, it's just considered a more of a health protein. So there's sort of the challenge for us, like, you know, those features, if it's not broke, don't fix it. We're obviously thinking about hybrid products. I know I'm getting ahead of the conversation there, but I think for us, it's important to make sure that as a hybrid seafood product, it still has all of those aspects of a high protein, lean, healthy product, and making sure that the hybrid portion of it, you know, doesn't get captured with all of the ideas of, hey, it's this process, so it's not healthy. But yeah, we can talk more about the hybrid stuff. I know we're going to get ahead of it.
You start getting into the level of processing and where it winds up on the ultra-processed scale, and you can get into conversations that can go on for hours.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, I think it just, you can really have all the nutrition in there, but if the consumer actually thinks this isn't healthy because it's processed, all those other good features of it don't really matter at that point. You might have the same protein content. You might be just as healthy, but if they believe it's unhealthy because they believe this is highly processed, we've already seen what's happened with plant-based with that. So,
Well, exactly. Pavle, is it a matter less of perhaps making sure that the nutrition is as equal as as people have come to depend on meat for? Is it more of an opportunity? There are opportunities to get additional nutrition factors in there, and what has to happen for that to happen?
Yeah, I mean, I think so we. Parity in terms of nutrition is a perfectly reasonable thing to aim for, and that's what we're aiming for at Omeat, and we're pretty close, right? But I don't think it's like the end all be all for us. You just made the point, right? I think it's more about consumer perception of the product than the reality, right? Most consumers are not flipping over the package and reading the details of the nutrition label. It's more about the narratives that are being put out there about plant-based products, for example, and the processing and so on and so forth. So it's something that we aim for. It's something that I think we recognize is important, but I don't think it is the most important thing that we need to be clearing as an industry for us to actually have a viable and a product that consumers are going to want.
Minami, do you agree with where he's coming from, or because you're right at the very beginning, you're working on the technology, the cutting edge technology, right at the very beginning of the process. Do you see it differently?
No, I agree with what's been said here. I also want to emphasize that cultivated meat, because we have so much control over the process, there is huge opportunity to add to the nutrition of the final product in ways that maybe conventional animal agriculture can't do. So in that way, I think that we do have a huge advantage there. We have the potential to be extremely nutritious and healthy. That's just a matter of how we communicate it, right, to consumers so that it's not off-putting.
And Claire, you were nodding. Your business is in flavoring, but you were nodding on the nutrition part. I suspect that from a processing point of view that there's probably a little more to it than just saying, hey, let's throw this flavor, let's throw this added nutrition into this bioreactor and it's going to come out great. What are the processes that need to be considered in that goal?
Yeah, well, the nutrition, flavor, texture, we have such an amazing space to be able to innovate in when it comes to cultivated foods. And I think the question is, do we want to make them exactly like what we have today, or do we want to actually make the product better? And sorry, Rich from Ivy Farms, you said, guys, if we can solve cost and scale, then everything else will follow. And then his entire presentation was about how it needs to taste good. And so I just want to make a case for, yes, you need to get it to scale, and that's what everybody focused on for a few years, and then you need to get it cost efficient, and now that's what investors are saying, don't scale until you know you can do it efficiently. But we're going to have another whole thing when it comes to taste, because you'll be able to scale something that tastes gross. But then everyone's going to be like, oh, whoops, I should have solved for that right at the beginning. So I think when it comes to these things, especially for taste, but with nutrition as well, we have to go, okay, what is the product that we're going to build? What is its job, to be said, as you said? What is the job of the product that we're building? In a hybrid future, it is taste and nutrition, right? Because those are the two things that the plant-based can't give. And so I think that we really have to think about, okay, how do we optimize for those things at the beginning? And you asked about how we can do that. Yes, we don't want to be putting in additional ingredients at the end of the process, because then you get a customer looking at a raw steak or a burger being like, that's a lot of ingredients. We want to be able to leverage the new approach that we all have, and that is that we're cultivating something in a bioreactor, right? No one else can do that. And so we can actually have the cells express their own flavor, express their own nutrition, express these things themselves by adding in precursors and enzymes at the beginning, rather than just relying on what everybody else is doing, which is adding ingredients or nutrition at the end.
And do we have anybody on the panel who wants to sort of add to that and expand or maybe come with a different point of view?
I guess, I agree that like taste above all else, right? That has to be the case. I just kind of want to push back a little bit on this idea that people are actually like spending time looking at their ingredients. I mean, I'm thinking about the average consumer, right? I know we do. I know we care a lot about these things. But to me, at the end of the day, the average consumer who's busy, maybe they've got 2 jobs, they're on the way home, they need to pick up a quick meal, they're not really the ones looking at the ingredients. I would probably say, the shortcomings of the plant-based products is that they're just not quite good enough yet, right? We talked about Tesla and electric cars earlier, right? No one's spending the time thinking about where the battery comes from and how it's made. They know that it's a cool, awesome car, and that's why they go for it. I would argue that if we can make our cultivated products taste as good or better than certainly plant-based products, but even conventional meat, the ingredients list is a far second down on that list.
Can I respond to that? I think you're right. There's studies that show that ingredients, it's not the ingredients, it's the number of ingredients. So that busy mom is like, oh, it's 20 versus 2. Great, I'll go with the one with 2. So yes, I think you're right. And then again, the plant-based products that we're hoping to replace, or they don't have those flavors, right? Like they're not meeting that taste. And so we have the ability as an industry to bring the taste for sustainable foods. And that's why I loved what the most of meat guys were talking about this morning is like, let's make sure that the products that we put out there are delicious and are nutritious rather than just putting out whatever we can get out there, right? Because that's gonna hurt the industry much further in the long run.
Well, maybe the secret word there that unlocks the door is hybrid, which isn't maybe doing the car industry that much good right now. And people don't really want to talk about it. But I love the point that was made in the first panel earlier today that, in fact, so many of the meat products that everybody's eating without looking at the ingredient panel are, in fact, very hybrid products already. And we are seeing some examples of where those products are being marketed as such and it's being done so successfully. Particularly, I'm thinking with Purdue's Chicken Plus Nuggets, where they advertise the fact that the vegetables are in there with the chicken, which is a fermented protein product. So where are we on hybrid? I mean, is that sort of is that a middle step? Is that maybe the goal for right now? Is that I've had some hybrid products. I had and I was in Israel, I had a chicken nugget that was plant-based, but it was flavored with a cultivated fat product, and it was amazing. And so I thought, I can't wait for this stuff to hit the market. But is that just me? Is that really have all of the promise that, and if so, why isn't it taking off more quickly?
Yeah, so at Optimized Foods, we're making a scaffold, and our research shows that the scaffolding is the key when it comes to making a product closer to mouthfeel-wise to conventional. So it is like, our scaffold is made of an edible mycelium. It's not animal-based, right? So it incorporates all the good things about what non-animal products can bring and combine it with animal cells to make cultivated meat. And it actually becomes a component that is essential to sort of move this forward and make it closer to what consumers want in terms of flavor and nutrition, but let's not forget mouthfeel, because that is also a huge portion of how consumers choose their foods. Like, it can't be slimy. And right now, we're maybe like the closest thing is unstructured meatballs and hamburgers, but eventually we want to get to that place that's more steak-like, or other meat products that have more rigidity. So in that sense, hybrid, I think, is not just something a middle point. I think it's just become something essential that we need in this industry.
Yeah, so we're doing hybrid. I think most folks are at this point, if they're honest about it, at least for the first products coming out. I guess a takeaway from me from the morning session, so I didn't know that the most popular sausage in the UK was only 43% pork. I thought that was fascinating. And they were already eating a lot of hybrid products. I guess my concern and my thinking on this has evolved because, initially we were saying, okay, we're going to do a hybrid product, and then, seeing all of the challenges from the plant-based space with the processing and this being overly processed, I think people might look at us a little more critically, and we need to have a cleaner label as hybrid products. Because if you're a traditional pork product, you're like, okay, there's 43% pork, there's some other stuff, but I've been eating this forever. When we are out there as a cultivated meat or seafood product, I think people are going to look under the hood maybe a little bit more than they do with other products. We might have a higher bar for ourselves, so our hybrid portion does need to be as clean label as possible, because we're just going to be under a microscope a little bit more than the traditional hybrid products that apparently I learned today are everywhere.
Yeah, I actually think that's a better go-to-market for the cultivated meat space, is just to replace the actual meat in today's products. Don't try to, let's not try to put out a raw burger and it's so cultivated, because then everyone's going to look at it and be like, oh, on the back, whatever. Think, actually, maybe in the first 3 or 4 years, all we do is we don't put out straight meat. We just sneak in, with the dairy proteins, how they're just replace, because milk's in everything, right? And so they just replace milk, just replace what's there today rather than create a completely new consumer end product.
So that Stouffer's lasagna that I lived on in college could someday be, the cultivated meat.
Right. It's going to get much better consumer acceptance if that's just already a product that they're familiar with, and we are just on the back end replacing. It's also going to be a much quicker path to scale because they're already making X many tons of it.
So you're saying it's as an ingredient?
Yeah. Maybe we should see ourselves more as an ingredient than a consumer end product initially.
And what's intriguing me here is we're talking about hybrid. We're also talking about the goal of replacing meat products, replacing a product that consumers are already familiar with. Is that the goal for cultivated meat ultimately, or cultivated meat? If we're moving on to the sort of the innovation part of the discussion. To me, the entire industry is an innovation. So. But is the ultimate goal of this innovation maybe to be something that nobody's even thought of yet? Why try to replace something that's already out there? Why not go for something that they haven't even...
Tiger tacos. Someone else want to answer that?
I think of it as the ultimate goal is to undermine and dismantle the industrial animal agriculture industry, right? So the products themselves have to be such a duh, this is so obviously better that I don't even have to think about it. I'm going to go for the cultivated item because it tastes better, it's more nutritious, it's cheaper, it's more accessible, all of the above, right? So to me, it's about undermining that existing industry, and that's really the work that we're doing at the end of the day. To your point, it's about the bigger picture than just creating one good product.
Well, I do think there's a little bit uncanny valley with the whole trying to replicate something that people know and getting there 95%, which again comes down to how important our go-to-market strategy as an industry is, right? Is can you slip it in and have people, you've been eating it for years, you didn't even realize, kind of thing. But yeah, I do think I am actually pro Tiger Tacos. I really want to try that. I think that would be fun. And so I do think that those two things could exist in parallel. I think there's a market for both. That there's people who are like, whoa, that's very exotic. I would love to know what elephant tastes like, but I definitely do not want to have an elephant killed for that tasting experience. But if I went to a restaurant and they said, hey, you can eat elephant and there were no elephants harmed in the making of that, I'd be up for it.
I got to say that mammoth meatball held no interest for me whatsoever, but
which actually could not be eaten because they didn't know how it would go.
Let's talk about the mammoth meatball. I love that there's different approaches out there. I love what Val is doing. I think that it's super interesting. I have a more conservative approach maybe, but I think that's good that we have a lot of approaches out there. Do you want to go 2 degrees removed away? Hey, this is cultivated, and it's some crazy species you've never eaten before in a form that you've never had before, tiger tacos, whatever. Or is it already like, hey, I want you to try a cultivated product of some animal that you're used to eating already? So, time will tell which approach plays out the best. Maybe it's appealing to different markets, but I think it's good we've got a lot of companies out in the space because people eat a lot of different types of animal protein, and we're thinking of different ways to replace those.
I agree with you. I think, when my head's in the... when my head's in the clouds, I love thinking about, totally custom proteins of, animals that don't exist or multiple animals or whatever, things that I like designed just for me. What's the long-term play for this industry look like? But I do think in the short term, some of tiger tacos and things like that are potentially doing more harm than good because we do have that uncanny valley of people still thinking of it as science and not as food, and we have to be careful about that. And I want us to be thoughtful about how we're presenting the work that we're doing. Like, how can we position the work that we're doing in a more offensive, go on the offense, be an offensive strategy rather than defensive, which is where I kind of think we are today, having to justify the work that we're doing. So my instinct is also to be a little bit more conservative about it, and maybe one day we'll get to that point where we can be a little bit more adventurous with the science.
Yeah. Oh. What about dinosaurs? No. No, I was gonna say, I think it's more realistic to think of it as like a new innovative category because I feel like no one here wants to like fight with the cattle industry, and it's not about like replacing all the meat. I think we're all trying to feed a population for the future, right? I think that's like the ultimate goal, and to have as many options as we can that consumers can choose from, I think is the way to go in terms of not taking over an entire industry or something like that. So that's just my take on it.
And yeah, with the protein demands in 2050 are going to be unmanageable otherwise, I think. So, when we're talking about innovation, although I can't say that the cultivated meat industry is entirely pre-revenue, it is mostly pre-revenue. And it is really living on that investment, that inflow of investment dollars. What is the role of the financing side of this in the innovation? An investor typically, or a venture capitalist, is looking at the company, and the company is the product. And so when we're talking about innovating the food product, what is the role of the financier or the investor in that particular process? Do they have a role? Should they be told to butt out, or where do we stand on that?
Well, I'm not a VC, but I think there's a lot of exciting science, and we're doing a lot of really exciting things, and there's kind of this instinct to almost chase every little shiny thing that you're working on. I think as companies, and as companies that are taking on this capital, we have an obligation to stay focused. So I think from that perspective, making sure that our focus is narrow and that we're delivering the one good thing that we're good at. I think what we see today is that there's tons of different companies approaching this many different ways. And I think as an industry, that's great. We should be really broad. But as each individual organization, making sure that we stay focused, I think is our biggest priority.
And is that helped along by the money backers?
Well, I think so, yeah. I mean, our value proposition is one very unique thing, right? And that's what attracted the investors that are investing in Omeat. So we always want to make sure that we don't lose sight of that.
Doug?
Yeah, I mean, I think you owe it to investors if they're going to be a part of the company. They're going to be part owners. That you You're not doing science fair projects, you know? We're not just doing research to do research. You know, we're doing a product roadmap for something that, at the end of the day, we think somebody's going to buy and going to eat and come back again. So, yeah, I'm not too critical of VCs. Obviously, I wish there were more involved right now. A lot of the money is dried up in the last couple of years, but I do think as more of the first wave of companies get products to market and more people just start eating these things, that you know, it won't be this outlandish thing, and we can start to see a path to scaling up the industry, and then, you know, getting governments involved. It was, you know, one of the earlier talks today was talking about the Department of Energy's Title 17 program. I mean, that's huge. That's a whole nother wave of financing that is, you know, much bigger than, you know, most VCs out there. You know, that's $100 million minimum project financed by the government. So help is hopefully on the way. You know, this is a climate technology. The climate problems are not going away. So I think as that starts to get on board, it's not just going to be VCs having to think, hey, we got to fund this thing and get us all the way through, you know, multiple rounds to get the products out to market. So, you know, it goes back to the classic, you know, public-private partnership.
So investors may not know this, but investors determine innovation goals. In the previous round of you know, growth that we all just had, investors wanted to see and taste product. And a lot of the startups, as a B2B business, I talked to lots of different startups, and they will say, oh, the tasting is the price that you pay to get the investors interested, right? Like, that's the deal. I can give you a tasting if you can, you know, if you'll invest in me, or you come and talk to me and I'll give you a tasting. And so what everybody focused on was growth, because they needed enough for somebody with money to put product in their mouth. Recently, investors have realized that, well, it doesn't matter if you can put it in your mouth, we've grown enough, but it's really expensive to make that. And what the companies are doing is going way back to the beginning of the process again and being like, okay, how do I replace my media? How do I get the cost down, right? And that's where a lot of today's mature companies are at, is now trying to work out how to kind of go backwards in the process and reduce their costs. The new startups coming out today are getting asked by their investors to get something that is cost efficient and can scale, right? So they're not scaling it until they know that it's cost efficient, and that's the smart way to do it because it's less expensive. And then my flavor drum, the third thing that needs to be done before scale is flavor, because that is the job of the cultivated foods. And so today what I hear from companies is, you need to tell, well, we can't focus on that right now because we're being asked by our investors to prove that we can grow something cost efficiently. And so investors in the room, if you're an investor, don't put your hand up because you're going to get mobbed. But if you're an investor in the room, it's really important that you think about what you are asking of the companies to innovate on and prove to you, because that is going to determine where money goes and what startups do. And we've seen already a lot of the early stage startups putting money into things that are essentially vanity metrics, like the size of their bioreactors, right? And a lot of money therefore be wasted, and then that looks bad on the industry, and so less people put money in, etc. But to be honest, a lot of that is created from investors asking things of companies that are not the smartest way to do it.
So would you say then that investors have an obligation to understand the science better than they did or maybe do today? Because a misunderstanding of the science, you know, your default state as an investor is, well, the goal is growth, and then when the goal is growth, you're making these kinds of promises as a company, and then potentially not delivering on them, which could potentially damage or jeopardize the entire industry.
Yeah, I think it comes back to this 5 to 10 year horizon. What is it that we're actually investing in, and what does that look like? I think when people say, oh, investors need to know science, they think they need to start getting technical. I wonder if saying investors need to understand product development and innovation. Like, you need to understand that you have to get these things right before you get this thing right, or you're just doing it really, really expensively. Yeah.
Oh, okay.
Well, you know, one of the things that occurs to me as I'm looking down this panel is that what we're seeing is maybe what started as kind of a soup to nuts approach to a cultivated meat product is really sort of broken down. We're seeing companies that are specializing in parts of the supply chain, and that this might be part of the whole reducing the cost. That's the way it looks to me, and I'm not in the industry, but I'm interested in what all of you are thinking about the more of the specialization, if you will, the like Henry Ford did the assembly line. We're sort of moving into a supply chain kind of thing where everybody sort of has their thing that they focus on, and what the advantages and disadvantages of that trend might be.
Yeah, I'll take that one. Oh, did you want to?
No, go, please.
Oh, I didn't see you, sorry.
After you, go.
Yeah, I think that gives me a lot of confidence and hope in the future of our industry. So background on Atlantic Fish Co. and how we started it, I had a podcast covering this industry, interviewed a lot of people that were in producers, and then I started having more and more guests on that were doing B2B strategies. So, the picks and shovels type companies that are doing media, they're doing bioreactors, they're doing flavor, all sorts of different niches coming in. So, the first companies in had this Herculean task of like building a whole new industry, educating people, regulatory, adapting this from like a pharma technology to making commodity food products. But now we are starting to get specialization. So it hasn't really been that long. It's only been a decade. So we are big on partnerships. You've got to figure out, what your secret sauce is and where your IP moat is going to be for whatever you're developing. But I think there's a lot of advantages to using expertise of partners, just being cognizant of, not having single points of failure where, if somebody doesn't make it, you don't make it. So you want to avoid that. But at the same time, partnerships, I think, will get us as an industry faster to market.
I think the specialized knowledge is fantastic for the industry, though it might not be for any one individual company, right? We've got, 150 plus cultivated and cultivated adjacent companies around the world, right? We're going to see a lot of consolidation in the industry, right? Whether it'll be companies consolidating or just the knowledge, those individuals, those scientists consolidating. And I think ultimately that'll be a good thing, right? We'll see a lot of companies that have a lot of that knowledge come together into one company, one organization that can truly pull it off. And that might be scary to hear, but I think that ultimately is what will lead to the ultimate breakthrough for this industry as over time we see some of that consolidation.
Yeah, I think we already know that we can make a product, a cultivated meat product. I think now what's going to happen is companies that are going to develop these tools to try to help check off those boxes that current cultivated meat can't, one of them being sustainability, for example. So what we're trying to do is we are making our scaffold out of agricultural waste, because mycelium has the power to hydrolyze different polysaccharides that animal cells can't, for example. So by incorporating such things into the final product, we can check off that box of sustainability, right? Or we can help work towards that goal. And I think there'll be a lot more companies like this that will either reduce cost or help make it sustainable in the future, now that the product of cultivated meat has already been established. Yeah.
I was just thinking that efficiency comes from specialization. So right now, when we have, as per Raku was saying from Multimedia earlier, we have a lot of the early stage companies are basically vertically integrated companies. They're creating it, they've got an entire industry within themselves. The new companies coming through are much more open to recognize, like, okay, this is what I am doing, and the rest of this is going to be provided by others. A typical industry has about 80% of its companies B2B. So like you think of the car industry or these kinds of things, like only a very small percentage of them are actually the Teslas of the world bringing the front end brand. The cultivated industry today, I think we're at 30% B2B, but someone correct me if I'm wrong there, right? And that just shows the age of our industry, is that we are on this cusp of shifting from we have to do everything and know everything ourselves to being comfortable that someone else is going to do this for us. And again, to come back to the investors, being really clear, because investors are like, well, that IP is not yours, right? So investors have to be really clear on what they are asking of their companies what is your IP? What is the piece that you own that makes you different? And then everything else needs to be provided by somebody else.
So let me ask, with that in mind, as the industry is moving forward, can it get where you think it needs to go without using such technologies as CRISPR, gene editing, biomodification, GMOs, however you want to define it? Can we get there by quote-unquote all natural processes, or is that manipulation going to be necessary to get where we need to be?
I don't know what everybody's doing. But I can say what we're doing a little bit. So we are leaning heavily into bioengineering. I feel like what we're doing is is hard. It's really complicated. This is not trivial. And if you're not using all the tools in the toolkit, you're fighting with one arm tied behind your back. So we are definitely bioengineering our fish cells. That's the strategy that we've approached with this. This might have been perceived as somewhat risky, but now we're starting to get a little bit more regulatory clarity, right? We've got some companies that have gotten through FDA and gotten through USDA, too. Okay, it's better than none. So yeah, and if the opportunity presented itself to actually do GMO and actually take the DNA from another organism and put in, and we felt like that would work, I would 100% do it. I'm just not convinced, and I know people want to brand something as non-GMO, and if it is non-GMO, you should put that on your label. I mean, people like that. But the truth is, a lot of products that we eat are GMO already. Not Upside Foods. Everybody says Upside Foods all the time. Impossible Foods actually was labeled as GMO on the back, right? And they just got into IHOP recently. So there is a path for using GMO foods and still being commercially successful. So I wouldn't limit ourselves, and that's our strategy.
You're going to be shocked to hear this, but I agree. We should be doing all of the above as aggressively as we can, right? To me, it's about maximizing our chance of success as an industry, so we should be trying everything. If companies want to pursue the GMO route, they should. If companies want to go non-GMO, they should do that as well. And we can, let the market decide which one should come out on top. But I don't think any one of us, as an industry, I don't think we should be closing a door because then we're just eliminating an entire category of options that could potentially be a path towards success.
As you were saying that, I triggered something. I haven't actually seen any data from U.S. consumers saying that. I have seen this from European consumers, that they would eat a cultivated product, but if it's GMO, there's a little bit of a drop-off. My instinct is that Americans don't think that way at all. So if you're going to sign up to eat a cultivated product, you would eat a cultivated GMO product. If someone has data out there that's blows hole in that assumption, please let me know. I'm honestly, I want to get to the right answer, not just spout off. So, but that's my instinct. So I don't know what you guys think.
So unfortunately, I agree. And it's because, I come from a very traditional, actually, food science, which before this, I studied wine, which is probably as traditional of a food you can get because it's existed for centuries. And, what are we doing in wine science? Well, we're breeding rootstocks so that the vines are more resistant to certain pests and diseases, and how even such a traditional food uses these exact toolboxes to still exist today and be loved by consumers. I think it's going to be the same thing for cultivated meat. It's just a box full of strategies as scientists that we can use to make this product as delicious and nutritious and flavorful as possible.
I'll say something different. I'll just say I don't know, because I don't know whether it's possible to accomplish what we want to accomplish non-GMO, because I'm not a scientist. Cellular flavoring is non-GMO, but if you GMO, you still need to do cellular flavoring. So we're come one, come all. I will just say, though, that there's also these other things out there where you can get something that's technically not genetically modified with seeds, you can just blast it with chemicals that cause rapid mutations. That's technically not GMO. And so I just think that the label of GMO is misleading, and we will just find a whole range of options when it comes to how we get to the attributes that we want.
And if there's a way to boil that idea down into a Fox News type soundbite, you might be able to convince the consumers as a whole that that little GMO symbol on the back is not the death of everybody. So moving from the technology into the food space, what, in your opinion, constitutes the culinary frontier? I mean, if we're thinking more about the art of what could be done with this technology, what does it look like in the kitchen, whether it's the home kitchen or the restaurant kitchen? When you're thinking about that future, where do you see it going, or where do you hope it will wind up?
I'll kick it off. I think we just have to be better. That's the promise of cultivated food, is that we can be more delicious. We can be more nutritious, right? On the things that people care about, we can design our products to be better on the things that they care about. And I think that is the hope, not just the sustainable side of it, but the doorway into the heart of the consumer. If it's delicious, they'll eat it, right? So, yeah, I just hope that we can make it more delicious, more nutritious on those kinds of things.
Yeah, I like to think about this as, hopefully in the near future, there's people going out to restaurants and they're going to make a decision that, like, no one has ever had the decision to make, right? Do I want to have the slaughter-free version, or do I want to have the slaughtered version of this dish tonight, right? And to your point, if it tastes as good and we can reach price parity, I think that's a real, tipping point psychologically for people, because they have to, consciously make that decision. And so, to me, that's a whole new frontier, because people are going to be making decisions, at restaurants and then hopefully in grocery stores that no one's ever made before. And I think that's how this movement could go from hey, we're just creeping along and it's tough right now, and there's not as much money, and all these things, and it's slow, and then it's all at once, right? That's where we have the tipping point, and that's where we ultimately win, because people will have to kind of divorce from the cognitive dissonance that they have right now about where their meat is coming from. They'll have an option. So I'm looking forward to that.
For fun, I'll disagree on this one. I don't think that the average consumer is ever going to make a decision between, or want to choose between slaughter and slaughter-free. I don't think the average consumer cares. I would say, where I hope this technology is headed, and where we're going, is that, I'm going to be able to pick a protein that is so incredibly custom and personal to me that I'm just gonna definitely go for that over a burger off the shelf, right? So if we're thinking long term, right? I think of it as we as a civilization domesticated animals, and now we're domesticating cells. We're domesticating the fundamentals of biology, right? So if we play out where this technology is going, it's about proteins, protein sources that maybe look vastly different than they do today. We're not emulating a cow. We're doing something that's completely custom to my tastes and my preferences. And because that is so incredibly personal to me, that's what I'm going to go for, because I'm a human being, I'm selfish, that's what I want, and that's what I'm going to pick. And I think that if we can kind of get the technology to that place, people are going to pick it because it's just inherently better, because that's what they want. How long do you think?
Because I like that too. I like your answer more.
I don't know. I mean, I would say we're certainly decades away from something like that. But I think that if we play the tape out, I mean, logically that's where we're headed.
I would say I hope, actually, this is kind of more my dream, but I hope that cultivated meat, at the very least, opens up a discussion or opens people's mindsets to try different sources of how foods are made, but different foods in general. Like, if people are so, like, kind of taken aback by how strange this is, at least I would like them to try it, and I would like it to be a point of sort of open discussion, open mindset, like, whoa, I just ate something that is not, like, grown from an animal, or like an animal was killed. So I think I want that to be the culinary friend here, and hope people have that kind of mindset to at least try it.
Those are all great thoughts, and we're going to open up for questions in just a second. I just want to ask our panelists if they have any sort of, closing words or parting thoughts before we hand the discussion over to the audience.
No, I mean, as an industry, I'm just glad to see so many different opinions and different thoughts on how we're approaching the science and how we're approaching building our companies. I think that's the right way to go about it, right? We should be trying everything, and by trying everything, I think that's how we'll discover, the best paths to success as an industry.
How would you say, like, 2023 has been tough on everybody? Yeah, it's hard for our industry. I think we've talked about that a lot today. It's sort of been a theme. Just showing grit. We're in the trough, but the problems are still out there. That hasn't changed from 2 or 3 years ago. So it still needs to be addressed. It's still important. I love working on this. I think everybody here loves working on this. And just stick to it. Don't quit.
Ever since I said it, I've just been like, what would an elephant steak taste like? So I'm still keen for that if anyone's going to do it. But mostly is just make what you're producing the most like the first bite that somebody has their reaction should be like, this is the most delicious Wagyu steak I've ever had. Or this is the most delicious burger. That is what is going to drive adoption for cultivated foods.
But I think you might be on your own with the elephant steak.
I'll eat elephant steak. I'll eat it. Yeah, no, I just wanted to close this by asking the audience, do you agree with us or disagree with us?
And with that, why don't we open up the floor up to anybody who might have a question or want to agree or disagree. I'm seeing some hands. Great.
Hi, my name is Noga with Alt Protein Careers. I'm curious what the talent bottleneck is. So if you could choose like the best X in the world to join your company that would really help, would it be food scientists? Would there be a specific kind of food scientists, like bioinformatics? Would it be marketing? Like, just curious where the bottleneck is on the talent side.
It's a great question. Look, there's a lot of great scientists out there. I think, the challenge for us, and I imagine this is certainly true for any company in this space, and frankly any company that's trying to bring in talent is, we're pushing the envelope, and every company's pushing the envelope in their own unique way, right? So there are things that we're doing at Omeat that are different than what other companies are doing, and when you're bringing in scientists, that means there's a period of time where you have to get that new hire up to speed, get them up to speed on your unique twist to the science and to the technology. So maybe a way to kind of turn that around and offer some advice to folks is to make sure that you're investing the time in people joining your organization to make sure that you're getting them up to speed quickly, conducting those knowledge transfers thoughtfully, so that you can get the most out of your scientists as quickly as possible.
We had a conversation with one of our advisors about this within the last week, and I don't know if it's like jobs like bioprocess engineers, food scientists, that kind of the nuts and bolts of roles on anybody's org chart here. I think it's a mindset, because a lot of the folks that people are recruiting are maybe coming from a much larger company and then coming into a startup. And what this advisor related to me was, you need to make sure you've got folks that you're bringing on board that have a startup mindset and aren't, working. I don't want to critique any industry as not working hard, so I'm just going to stop there. But just yeah. So it's we don't want it shouldn't be like The Office, right? Not to disparage anybody, but I think it's some mindset with that, and making sure that any recruits know they're getting involved in a high-risk, early-stage startup. Welcome aboard.
CellAg exists at the intersection of biotechnology and agriculture. And so typically someone is coming from one of those two backgrounds, right? They're a food scientist that spent a lot of time in plant-based, or they're a biotech person that spent a lot of time in pharmacy. And so I think that the more that our education institutions can allow people to cross-breed, and even within the education institutions, there's a little bit of tension between the biotech crew and the agricultural crew, right? The more that our education institutions and educational opportunities can help people to cross-pollinate, that would be great.
I want to pick up on that thought really quickly, and also on the question and talk about tension. A little bit of background: I was at an alternative meat conference earlier this year, and I was having a conversation with the R&D director of a plant-based meat analog company. I won't mention which one, you'd all know who it is. And having this, what I assured him is an off-the-record conversation, he said, what I really am trying to convince our guys to do, our people to do, is to hire meat scientists. If we're going to make a meat-like product, we need to have the people who have the background in the meat product. Agree or disagree?
I was talking with a university professor from Europe who is from the meat background, but typically takes it from the slaughter on, like how you slaughter an animal, how does it affect its flavor, right? It's very impactful. She sees a lot of parallels, right, and is applying that information into what happens in the cultivated space. So if she would disagree with me, because my initial reaction is, it's so different, right? Like, what is applicable? I don't have it. That's it.
No, I think that's exactly right. It's such a new field that no one has cultivated meat. No one has a degree in cultivated meat. No one has as much experience of the all-encompassing parts of what cultivated meat entails. And that's exactly what we're actually trying to do at the CMC at UC Davis is create a coursework for educating and creating a young workforce that knows specifically the needs of cultivated meat industry, whether that be in the sciences or economics, and apply those basic science skills to this nascent industry. It could be borrowing from meat as the basic knowledge science, but then catering it towards and innovating it in ways that are useful for cultivated meat science.
I think it would be naive of us to think that the established animal agriculture industry doesn't have tons of extremely valuable knowledge in it, right? And we should be poaching as much of that knowledge as possible. There's a lot that we can learn. At Omeat, we try and talk about ourselves. Hey, we're a meat company, right? I think we're not there yet, right? But at the end of the day, the more we can pull knowledge from an established industry and benefit from the successes that they've had, so that we can do what we do better, we should be doing that as much as possible.
I agree.
And we had other questions in the audience.
I guess I raised the hand faster. Lisa, thank you very much for bringing that. My name is Hamilton DeMello. I'm a meat scientist at the University of Nevada, Reno, and I think it was a very important question. I'm going to pick back on her question, too. So I think that the way that I have been understanding here that one of the most important challenges that the industry has is currently the flavor and the taste, right? So the majority of meat scientists that are pretty much involved on that type of research, they understand a lot about volatile compounds. So I have been seeing that importance of omega-3s to improve like nutritional values. And we didn't even talk about the nanonutrients that are involved in RNAs and DNAs that can be absorbed by humans too. So I guess in order to craft my question better for you guys, so do you think that that partnership, that interaction between the conventional meat industry with the cultured meat industry is essential for the success of your segment or the other segment, right? So I think that, do you see that any type of collaboration of both parties can be beneficial for you both? Thank you very much.
So this is partnerships between cultivated meat companies and existing and conventional.
You learn from the
Yeah.
the agricultural version of the whitefish that
Yeah.
you're.
Wild-caught seafood's a little bit different. So I'll try to answer your question for how we think about it with seafood and partnerships with companies in the future that are big meat and seafood producers, providers. I think if we prove the technology, we prove the market demand, like the startups here do that first step. The next step is, will these big, existing companies want to partner, want to acquire, want to be a part of this? Are they going to see themselves as protein companies in the future? Or are they going to see themselves as meat companies in the future? I'd like to think, and I'm optimistic, that they're going to see themselves as protein producers in the future. But they could get caught in, the innovator's dilemma, where, they're like Kodak, right, that had digital technology, but they were in the film business, so that was hard for them to branch over. Maybe they're going to be more of a Netflix model, right? We're not doing DVDs anymore. We're going to go to streaming. So, some companies, some industries are able to make that jump. I'm optimistic, and what we need to happen is for big meat to say, hey, we're actually big protein, and you guys have really cool technology, and we want to partner, or we want to acquire you. We want to build that future. But I think we need to be wary and cautious to make sure that the incentives are aligned and that we're making good partnerships that are going to advance the mission of our industry, which is to reduce the number of animals killed for meat and seafood.
I'm glad you re-asked it, because from a flavor perspective, the traditional meat industry knows a lot about what you feed your fish or your cows results in a different flavor from the animal, which is the thesis that cellular flavoring is based on, right? And so we are building that connection right now in terms of translating that knowledge from feedstock into the lab equivalent, which is cultured media. So on that one particular dimension, yes, I think it is essential for us to work with agricultural companies. Yes, there's a lot to learn.
And we have other questions. Oh, we have.
In terms of product design and product management, product development, there's the quote about Henry Ford not asking people what they want. And a lot of the conversation today with Mosa Meats is based off of consumer feedback. That taste is the most important thing. But you also see price is very close to taste, and we do a lot of DOE, design of experiment statistical analysis. So my brain thinks like what's like the variation or deviation, is this statistically accurate? But you can see maybe some trends with the economy affecting price, and you see price currently as an increasing factor of why someone might buy food. My question is, is there maybe a product that we could design that is something futuristic, innovative, out of the box? And Minami mentioned something about, feeding the world. And, there's a lot of great benefit to feeding the world with no-kill meat. What do you think about maybe like $1 a pound nutritious food that could feed the hungry, that all of the biomimetic or biosimilar products that taste great might not be able to do.
Yeah, I mean, I think that's the dream, right? Another dream that I have. I would love to have a product like that is cheap, that is delicious, that is, yeah, like affordability. I think is huge, we're all kind of trying to reach that goal, right? We're all trying to, I think, not just the cultivated meat industry, I think plant-based too, fermentative, alternative proteins. We're all trying to make this food product that will be able to resolve some of these, societal challenges we have in terms of like food insecurity. So I completely agree, and we're all working towards that same goal.
Just to kind of add to that, right? I think, as our technology improves, price is going to keep coming down, right? But I think if you look at the globe, you look at the macro situation, the price of meat, of conventional meat, is only going to continue to rise. So as far as I'm concerned, the work that we're doing here is inevitable, and it's only a matter of time.
It's way better than an elephant steak. I love it. In a previous life, I was a strategic designer, which is one of those like design thinking people that interviews consumers, and the Ford thing comes up all the time, but consumers don't know what they want. And it's about latent needs, right? So yeah, they want a faster horse, but why do they want the faster horse? They want to get to where they want to go from A to B faster, right? And so it's not like you ask, you build a faster horse, you understand what's the latent need behind that request. Which is to get from A to B faster. And this is where things like taste and cost come into it, right? So we don't have to hold exactly that they want steak taste. Because if you can deliver something that hits the taste notes that they like, which is very different wherever you are, then they'll probably take that instead. So that, I think, is a very cool challenge that you've just put towards everybody, is to understand the latent needs, like what is delicious to a customer, or what could be delicious to a customer in a particular region that is at the lowest cost and highest protein per gram.
With that, we are going to have to cut the Q&A session off. I think it is absolutely to all of our panelists' credit that I did not see anybody leaving this room to go to the bar. And so with that, I would like to thank them all for their contributions.